The massive alien ships appeared in Earth's orbit without warning. They were enormous, each one larger than any city on the planet's surface. Their hulls gleamed with strange metals that seemed to shift colors in the sunlight. Within hours, every government on Earth received the same message. The Galactic Council wanted to speak with humanity's leaders. President Concuil stood in the United Nations Assembly Hall, watching as the holographic projection flickered to life. The alien that appeared before them was tall and thin, with smooth purple skin and 4 arms. Its eyes were large and black, reflecting no emotion. It wore elaborate robes covered in symbols that seemed to glow with their own light. The alien spoke, and a translator device rendered its words into every human language simultaneously. It introduced itself as Ambassador Thalzix of the Vaxilian Empire, primary representative of the Galactic Council. The Council, it explained, was an alliance of 12 advanced species that governed most of the known galaxy. They had been aware of humanity for some time, watching and evaluating. Thalzix said that humanity had finally reached a level of technology that allowed them to make contact. However, before Earth could be considered for membership in the galactic community, they had to prove themselves worthy. This was done through an ancient and honored tradition that every species had undergone for thousands of years. The tradition was simple. Earth must provide 500 of its best citizens to serve the Council for 20 cycles, which translated to roughly 25 Earth years. These humans would work in various Council facilities throughout the galaxy. They would learn humility, discipline, and proper conduct. They would understand their place in the greater universe. President Kang listened carefully, his face showing nothing. Around him, other world leaders whispered urgently to their advisors. Some looked angry. Others looked afraid. Kang simply watched the alien ambassador and waited for more information. Thalzix continued, explaining exactly what the Council required. The 500 humans must be healthy, between the ages of 20 and 50. They must be capable of performing physical labor. They must have intelligence above the average of their species. The Council wanted scientists, engineers, artists, philosophers, and leaders. They wanted humanity's finest examples. These tribute workers, as Thalzix called them, would be taken to various locations across the galaxy. Some would work in mining operations on distant asteroids. Others would help construct buildings on alien worlds. Some would manage waste disposal systems for Council stations. Some would serve as manual laborers in factories and processing plants. The work would be hard, but it would be a great honor. The ambassador assured the gathered leaders that this was standard procedure. Every species that joined the Council had sent their tribute workers. Many of those workers eventually returned home with valuable knowledge and experience. They became ambassadors themselves, helping their species integrate into galactic society. It was a gift, really, though it might not seem like one at first. President Kang finally spoke, his voice calm and measured. He asked how long Earth had to decide. Thalzix seemed pleased by the question, interpreting it as acceptance. The ambassador said that Earth had 30 planetary rotations, 30 days, to gather the 500 humans and prepare them for transport. If Earth refused, the Council would impose economic sanctions. Earth would be denied access to galactic trade routes. Earth would be forbidden from expanding beyond their own solar system. Earth would remain isolated, cut off from the greater universe. Other leaders began to protest. But Kang raised his hand for silence. He thanked Ambassador Thalzix for the clear explanation and said that Earth would need 7 days to prepare a response. The aliens seemed surprised by this. Most species either accepted immediately or rejected the demand and faced the consequences. The idea of negotiating or considering the terms seemed foreign to Thalzix. The ambassador agreed to the 7-day delay, though it made clear that the 30-day deadline remained firm. The hologram faded, leaving the assembly hall in shocked silence. Immediately, arguments erupted. Some leaders wanted to refuse outright and prepare for possible conflict. Others insisted they had no choice but to comply. A few suggested trying to negotiate better terms. Kang said nothing as the chaos swirled around him. He watched the space where the hologram had been, thinking carefully. His chief of staff, Lee Min-ho, approached and whispered that they needed to convene the Earth's Security Council immediately. Kong nodded and left the assembly hall. Ignoring the questions shouted at him by journalists and diplomats, in a secure conference room deep below the United Nations building, Kong met with his closest advisors. Defense Minister Park Tae-jin wanted to know if Earth could fight the aliens if necessary. Intelligence Director Nam Jun-ho said their preliminary analysis suggested the alien ships had weapons far beyond anything Earth possessed. Scientific advisor Dr. Choi Mina pointed out that the Council's demands were carefully worded, most like a legal contract. Kong asked Dr. Choi to explain. She pulled up the translated text of Salzik's speech on a large screen. She highlighted specific phrases. The Council wanted 500 human specimens capable of performing labor. They needed to be healthy by basic medical standards. They needed to be between certain ages. But nowhere did the demand specify education level, criminal history, psychological evaluation, or moral character. Park Tae-jin began to smile. He asked if Dr. Choi was suggesting what he thought she was suggesting. She nodded slowly. The demand was insulting, treating humanity like primitive animals that needed to be trained. But it was also carelessly worded. If Earth chose to comply with the exact letter of the demand, rather than its obvious intent, they could send 500 humans who met every technical requirement. While completely subverting the Council's actual goals, Kong leaned back in his chair, considering. It was risky. The Council might see it as deception and retaliate. But it was also perfectly legal according to their own terms. And more importantly, it would send a message that humanity would not be bullied or treated as inferiors. They would comply with the demand in the most malicious way possible. He asked his advisors to develop a complete plan within 3 days. They needed to identify exactly which humans they would send, verify that those individuals met all the technical requirements, ensure that everything was documented properly. If they were going to do this, they needed to do it perfectly. Leaving no room for the Council to claim humanity had violated the agreement, as his advisors left to begin their work. Kong stared at the ceiling and allowed himself a small smile. The Galactic Council wanted to teach humanity humility and proper conduct. Instead, they were about to learn a very different lesson about underestimating humans. 3 days later, Dr. Choi Mina presented her findings to the Earth's Security Council. She had assembled a team of the best lawyers, linguists, and analysts on the planet. They'd reviewed the Council's demand from every possible angle, checking for loopholes, technicalities, and any potential problems with the plan that was forming. The results were clear. The Council's treaty language was surprisingly simple and direct. They wanted 500 humans capable of performing labor. The humans needed to pass basic health screenings. They needed to be within a certain age range. That was essentially it. There were no requirements about education, skills, personality traits, or background checks. The Council had assumed that any civilized species would naturally send their best people when asked. Park Tae-jin spread a map across the conference table. It showed the locations of maximum security prisons across Earth. These facilities housed the most dangerous criminals in human society. People who had committed terrible crimes and been judged too dangerous to ever be released. Serial killers who had murdered dozens of people. War criminals responsible for atrocities. Terrorists who had destroyed entire cities. Leaders of criminal organizations that had caused suffering across multiple continents. The defense minister explained his idea simply. Earth would send 500 volunteers from these prisons. They would be individuals who met every single technical requirement in the Council's demand. They would be human. They would be healthy enough to work. They would be within the right age range. But they would also be the most violent, unstable, and dangerous individuals that humanity had to offer. Dr. Choi added that she had already verified the plan's legality under the Council's own rules. The treaty said nothing about criminal records or psychological profiles. As long as the individuals could physically perform labor and met the basic health standards, they qualified as acceptable tribute workers. The Council had written a sloppy contract, and humanity was going to exploit every gap in it. President Kong asked about the ethical implications. They would be sending dangerous people to alien facilities where other species would be working. Park Taijin acknowledged this was a concern, but pointed out that the council was essentially demanding slavery. They were taking people from their homes to work in terrible conditions for decades. If the council wanted to treat others this way, they should be prepared to face the consequences. Intelligence Director Nam Junho raised another point. Many of these prisoners would see this as an opportunity. Some would volunteer simply for a chance at freedom, even if it meant working on an alien mining station. Others would volunteer because they wanted to cause chaos and destruction. Some would be motivated by hatred of authority, and a few might see it as a strange form of redemption, a way to serve humanity by making the aliens regret their arrogant demand. Kong approved the plan with one strict condition. Every prisoner had to volunteer freely after being fully informed about what they were agreeing to. No one would be forced to go. The prisoners needed to understand that they would be taken off-world to alien facilities. They would be expected to work for the council. There would be no guarantee of return. But if they caused enough problems, they might help convince the council to leave Earth alone in the future. Over the next 4 days, representatives visited maximum security facilities across the planet. They met with prisoners individually and explained the situation. The initial response exceeded all expectations. More than 2,000 prisoners volunteered immediately. Many were eager for any chance to leave their prison cells. Others relished the idea of causing trouble for the aliens who had insulted humanity. The selection team chose 500 individuals carefully. They needed people who were physically healthy and capable of passing the council's medical screening. But they also wanted a specific mix of personalities and skills. They selected people with military training who knew how to fight and organize others. They chose individuals with technical knowledge who could understand and potentially sabotage alien systems. They included people who were naturally charismatic and could inspire others to follow them. Among those selected was BQ, a former Special Forces soldier who had killed 17 people during a violent uprising at a Mars colony. He was intelligent, disciplined, and utterly ruthless. He had been sentenced to life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. When offered the chance to leave Earth and potentially strike back at alien oppressors, he accepted without hesitation. Another volunteer was Imsora, a brilliant biochemist who had poisoned everyone at a research station when they discovered her illegal experiments. She was cold, calculating, and fascinated by the idea of studying alien biology firsthand. She told the selection team that she had always wondered if humans could develop biological weapons that worked on non-human species. Now she would have the chance to find out. There was Hanju, a hacker who had crashed the global financial network just to prove he could. He had spent the last 8 years in solitary confinement, cut off from all technology. The idea of accessing alien computer systems filled him with excitement. He practically begged to be included in the group. Onbora had been a terrorist leader, responsible for bombings that killed hundreds. She was a master of improvisation, able to build weapons from ordinary materials. She saw this as an opportunity to fight against oppression, even if the oppression was coming from aliens instead of human governments. President Kong reviewed the final list of 500 names. Each person had a file detailing their crimes, capabilities, and psychological profile. It was a collection of humanity's worst nightmares, people who had proven themselves capable of terrible things. And now, they would be representing Earth to the Galactic Council. On the 7th day, exactly as promised, Kong sent Earth's official response to Ambassador Thalzix. The message was polite and professional. Earth would comply with the Council's demand. 500 humans would be provided within the required 30-day deadline. All individuals would meet the specified requirements. Earth hoped this would demonstrate humanity's willingness to participate in galactic traditions and work toward eventual council membership. Dalzix responded quickly, expressing satisfaction with Earth's decision. The ambassador said that a transport fleet would arrive in 23 days to collect the tribute workers. The council was pleased that humanity had chosen the path of cooperation rather than foolish resistance. This showed wisdom and maturity. Kong read the response and felt no guilt about what was coming. The council had treated humanity with contempt, demanding that Earth send its best people to work as slaves. They had assumed humanity would submit meekly to this humiliation. They were about to learn a very expensive lesson about making assumptions. The 500 selected prisoners were moved to a special facility, where they underwent the required medical screenings. Council physicians examined each human remotely using scanning technology. All 500 passed the health requirements easily. The Council's medical standards were surprisingly low, focused mainly on ensuring the workers could physically perform labor without immediately dying during the waiting period. Something unexpected happened. The prisoners began to bond with each other and develop a strange sense of purpose. They were criminals, yes, but they were also humans about to face an alien civilization that saw them as inferior. Despite their crimes and differences, they started to see themselves as a team. United against a common enemy, Baekhyun emerged as an informal leader. He had military experience and natural authority. He began organizing the others, teaching them basic tactical concepts, and helping them understand how to work together. Imsora shared her knowledge of chemistry and biology. Hanju-woo explained how to identify and exploit weaknesses in security systems. By the time the Council's transport, ships arrived. The 500 prisoners were no longer just a collection of violent individuals. They had become something more dangerous. They were a coordinated group with skills, motivation, and absolutely nothing to lose. And they were about to be handed over to aliens who expected grateful, submissive workers. President Kong pushed the alien ships descend toward the collection point and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The Council wanted tribute workers. Earth was giving them exactly what they asked for, just not what they expected. The transfer ceremony took place at a designated landing zone in the neutral territory of Switzerland. Cameras from every major news network on Earth broadcast the event live. Millions of people watched as the massive Vaxiline transport ships settled onto the ground, their landing gear crushing the grass beneath their enormous weight. Commander Jexler descended from the primary ship surrounded by guards. He was larger than Ambassador Thalzix, with darker purple skin and visible scars that suggested military experience. His forearms moved with precise coordination as he gestured to his subordinates. The guards wore armor that shimmered with energy fields and carried weapons that hummed with barely contained power. Ambassador Yoon Jisoo stepped forward to greet the commander. She was Earth's representative for the transfer, chosen for her diplomatic experience and her ability to maintain a completely neutral expression, regardless of circumstances. She carried a data tablet containing all the official documentation for the 500 humans being transferred. Commander Jexler spoke through his translator device, expressing satisfaction that Earth had chosen to honor the Council's tradition. He said that these humans would learn much during their service. They would gain perspective on their place in the universe. They would return to Earth as better, more enlightened individuals, assuming they survived and earned the right to return. Yoon Jisoo smiled politely and handed over the documentation. Jexler scanned through it quickly, checking names, medical reports, and verification that each human met the basic requirements. Everything appeared to be in order. He did not look closely at the detailed background information that was also included in the files. If he had, he might have noticed some concerning patterns in the personal histories. The 500 humans began boarding the transport ships in organized groups. They walked calmly, following instructions without complaint. They wore simple gray uniforms provided by Earth, with no personal possessions except basic toiletries, to the Vaxilian guards watching them. They seemed appropriately subdued and resigned to their fate. What the guards did not recognize was the way the humans moved. Baekhyun walked with the controlled grace of a trained fighter. Imsora's eyes constantly scanned her surroundings, noting details and vulnerabilities. Hanju-woo's fingers twitched as if typing on an invisible keyboard, already thinking about the ship's computer systems. Anbora smiled slightly as she noticed the placement of the guards and the obvious weaknesses in their formation. Commander Jexler did notice something odd about the humans' eyes. Most tribute workers showed fear or sadness during the transfer. These humans showed neither. Some looked curious. Others looked eager. A few had expressions that could only be described as predatory. When Jexler mentioned this to Ambassador Yoon, She simply assured him that humans expressed emotions differently than other species. These were 500 capable specimens. Exactly as requested. The ships lifted off smoothly, leaving Earth's atmosphere within minutes. The humans were divided among 3 transport vessels, with approximately 167 humans per ship. They were taken to a cargo hold that had been converted into temporary living quarters. The space was cramped, but functional. With rows of sleep pods and basic amenities, for the first 3 days, the humans remained remarkably quiet. They ate the food provided without complaint, though several commented that it tasted like processed cardboard mixed with synthetic nutrients. They followed instructions during the daily exercise periods. They stayed in their assigned areas and caused no disturbances. The Vaxillian guards interpreted this as normal adjustment behavior. Most tribute workers went through a period of shock when first taken from their home worlds. They needed time to process what was happening to them. The guards had seen it countless times before. After a few days, tribute workers would accept their situation and become properly submissive. What the guards failed to realize was that the humans were not adjusting to captivity. They were studying. Baekhyun watched the guards shift changes and memorized their patrol patterns. Imsora observed the food distribution system and identified which crew members handled supplies. Hanju paid close attention every time a guard opened a door or accessed a control panel. Noting the sequences and movements, the humans also talked among themselves, sharing information and developing plans. They spoke in Korean, Mandarin, English, Spanish, Arabic, and half a dozen other Earth languages. The Vaxillian translation devices could render their words into the common galactic language. But the guards rarely paid attention to prisoner conversations. They assumed tribute workers would only discuss their fear and sadness. On the 4th day, Baekhyun decided it was time to test the guards' responses. During the morning meal distribution, he deliberately bumped into another prisoner, creating a small argument. The argument escalated into pushing and shouting. 2 guards moved in to separate them, following standard protocols for handling disputes. What happened next occurred in seconds. As one guard reached for Baekhyun, he twisted smoothly and used the guard's own momentum to slam him into the wall. The second guard raised his weapon, but 3 other prisoners tackled him from behind. In the resulting chaos, Hanju slipped close enough to the struggling guard to lift his security keycard. While pretending to be knocked aside by the time additional guards arrived, Baekhyun and the others were sitting peacefully on the floor looking confused and apologetic. They claimed it was all a misunderstanding, that the strange food was making them irritable, that they meant no disrespect. The guards separated them from the general population for 6 hours as punishment, then returned them to the cargo hold. Baekhyun now had a guard's keycard. Hanju spent the next 2 days studying it carefully, figuring out how the Vaxillian security systems worked. The keycard used a simple magnetic strip combined with a biometric sensor that read body temperature and electromagnetic field patterns. The biometric lock was meant to prevent theft, but it was calibrated for Vaxillian biology. Human biology was different enough that the lock could not get a proper reading. The card would work for anyone who held it. Over the following days, the humans began to move more freely through the ship. They discovered that the security keycards opened many doors that should have been restricted. They found storage areas, maintenance corridors, and even access to some of the ship's systems. They moved during shift changes and when guards were distracted. They never took anything obvious or did anything that would trigger immediate alarms. On the 7th day, 3 guards disappeared during their patrol. They were found 2 hours later in a waste disposal room, bound with strips torn from uniforms and gagged with wadded fabric. They had been stripped of their weapons, armor, and communication devices. They were uninjured, but deeply shocked and confused about how humans had managed to overpower them. Commander Jexler was furious when he received the report. He immediately ordered increased security throughout the transport fleet. Extra guards were posted in all areas where humans were present. All security protocols were reviewed and reinforced. The commander sent messages to the other 2 ships in the fleet, warning them to watch their human cargo carefully, but the damage was already done. The humans had proven something important to themselves. They could act against their captors successfully. The Vexillian guards were not invincible. The ships were not escape-proof. And most importantly, the Council's representatives were not prepared to deal with prisoners who fought back intelligently and ruthlessly. Baekhyun gathered the other humans in quiet groups during the night cycle. He told them to be patient. They were going to arrive at the processing facility soon. That was when things would get interesting. The ships were cramped and heavily guarded, limiting their options. But a processing facility would have more space, more systems, more opportunities, and there would be other aliens present. Tribute workers from other species who might be inspired by what they saw humans doing. Sora added that they needed to cause maximum disruption without killing unnecessarily. Dead guards would bring a military response. Chaos and sabotage would create confusion and make the Council question whether tribute workers were worth the trouble. They needed to make themselves so problematic that sending them back to Earth seemed like the better option. The other prisoners listened and understood. They had all committed terrible crimes in their past, but now they had a chance to do something different. They could strike back against beings who saw humans as primitive animals to be enslaved. They could defend humanity's dignity in the strangest way possible. They could be villains who became heroes simply by refusing to submit. As the transport fleet approached the Drexus 4 asteroid facility, Commander Jexler reviewed his reports with growing unease. The humans had been too quiet since the incident with the guards. In his experience, tribute workers either stayed quiet out of fear or they caused constant problems. These humans had gone silent after demonstrating they could cause problems. That suggested they were planning something. He sent another message to the facility director, warning that these particular tribute workers might require special handling. He noted that they seemed unusually organized and capable of coordinated action. He recommended additional security during processing. The facility director acknowledged the message but seemed unconcerned. The Drexus 4 facility had handled difficult tribute workers before from dozens of species. Surely these humans could not be that different. Commander Jexler hoped the facility director was right, but he could not shake the feeling that he had just delivered a very dangerous cargo to people who had no idea what they were receiving. The Drexus for processing facility orbited a large asteroid rich in rare minerals. The facility itself was enormous, designed to handle thousands of tribute workers from dozens of species. It contained living quarters, training areas, medical facilities, and administrative sections. From here, tribute workers were evaluated and then distributed to various council operations throughout the galaxy. Facility Director Kesmith was a senior Vexillian with 40 years of experience managing tribute workers. He had processed members of species both docile and aggressive, intelligent and simple, compliant and resistant. He considered himself an expert in breaking down the spirit of newly arrived workers and molding them into productive servants of the Council. When Commander Jexler's warnings arrived about the human cargo, Kesmith reviewed them with mild interest. The commander seemed concerned that these particular humans might be troublesome. Kesmith noted this in his files, but saw no reason to alter standard procedures. Every species thought they were special. Every group of tribute workers believed they could resist. They all learned the same lesson eventually. The transport ships docked at Drexus 4's receiving bay. The 500 humans were unloaded in groups and taken to Processing Area 12, a large open space where new arrivals were cataloged and given their initial orientations. Kesmoth watched through security monitors as the humans filed into the room. Noting their expressions and body language, something seemed off. Most tribute workers at this stage looked defeated and frightened. These humans looked alert and interested. They were observing everything, studying the facility's layout, watching the guards. Kesmith made a mental note to request psychological evaluations sooner than usual. The standard orientation began. A Vaxillian administrator explained the rules of the facility through translation devices. Tribute workers would be assigned to dormitories based on species and gender. They would attend mandatory training sessions to learn proper conduct and work ethics. They would be evaluated for specific skills and then assigned to appropriate work details. Obedience would be rewarded. Resistance would be punished. Baekhyun listened carefully, translating the administrator's words in his mind. The facility operated on a simple system of control through punishment and reward. The guards carried stun weapons, but not lethal ones. The dormitories were segregated to prevent different species from organizing together. The training sessions were designed to break individual spirits. It was efficient and had probably worked for thousands of years on species that valued order and respected authority. But humans, especially humans who had already rejected their own society's rules, did not value order or respect authority. And the facility's designers had made a critical mistake. They had built a system designed to handle frightened, compliant beings. They had not built a system designed to contain organized criminals with nothing to lose. The humans were taken to their assigned dormitory, a large room with hundreds of sleeping platforms arranged in neat rows. Basic sanitation facilities were located at one end. Food dispensers lined one wall. Guards were posted at the single entrance. The room was designed to hold up to 300 individuals, so the 500 humans were split between two adjacent dormitories. For the first 6 hours, the humans appeared to settle in quietly. They chose sleeping platforms, tested the food dispensers, and explored the basic facilities. The guards relaxed slightly, thinking that perhaps Commander Jexler had been overly concerned. Then Baekhyun gave a simple signal. And everything changed. Hanjuul had been studying the food dispensers carefully. He discovered they were connected to a central computer system that managed resource distribution throughout the facility. Using techniques he had learned during his criminal career, he accessed the dispenser's maintenance interface and began introducing corrupted code. Within minutes, food dispensers across 3 entire sections of the facility began malfunctioning, spraying nutrient paste everywhere and triggering contamination alarms simultaneously. Onbora and several others started a carefully planned disturbance in the dormitory. They began arguing loudly, pushing each other, and creating chaos. When guards entered to restore order, they found themselves surrounded by angry humans who did not respond to stun weapons the way other species did. Humans could be stunned, but they recovered faster than expected, and they seemed to feel less pain than the guards anticipated. In the confusion, Imsora slipped out of the dormitory with a small team. She had noticed that the medical facility was located 2 corridors away. She wanted to study the alien medical supplies and equipment, both out of scientific curiosity and to identify anything useful. What she found exceeded her expectations. The medical facility contained chemical supplies, pharmaceutical compounds, and biological samples from dozens of species. Over the next 12 hours, the situation escalated rapidly. The humans discovered that the facility's designers had prioritized efficiency over security. Corridors were not monitored constantly. Many areas could be accessed with simple tools. The computer systems were sophisticated but not designed to prevent intrusion from inside the facility. The humans split into teams with different objectives. One team focused on sabotage, targeting life support systems, power distribution, and communications. Another team stole supplies and equipment, building hidden caches throughout the facility. A third team simply caused disturbances. Keeping the guards busy and distracted, Facility Director Kesmoth watched in growing horror as his orderly facility descended into chaos. He sent urgent messages to the Council requesting guidance and additional security forces. He implemented emergency protocols, locked down entire sections, and deployed all available guards. Nothing seemed to work. The humans were everywhere, doing everything, and they moved with a level of coordination that suggested military training. On the second day, something unexpected happened. Tribute workers from other species began to notice what the humans were doing. A group of insectoid beings from the Kresh Hive had been working in the facility's maintenance section for 2 years. They had accepted their servitude as inevitable, part of the natural order. But watching the humans fight back made them question this acceptance. When a human team sabotaged the water purification system, several Kresh workers deliberately failed to report it immediately. When guards chased humans through the maintenance corridors, Kresh workers gave wrong directions. Small acts of resistance, but significant. The humans were inspiring rebellion in others. By the third day, the facility was in complete disarray. 17 separate systems had been sabotaged. The food distribution network was barely functional. Power kept cutting out in random sections. The medical facility's entire chemical storage had been compromised, with dangerous compounds missing. And the guards were exhausted from chasing humans who seemed to appear and disappear at will. Baekhyun called a meeting of the human teams in a service corridor they had claimed as their unofficial headquarters. He was pleased with their progress, but wanted to escalate further. They had proven they could cause chaos. Now they needed to seize actual control of something important, something that would force the council to negotiate. Imsora suggested they take over the facility's central computer core. Han Jiwoo agreed, adding that from there they could control everything: life support, communications, security systems, even the docking bays. Anbora pointed out that they would need hostages to prevent the guards from simply storming the computer core with overwhelming force. The plan came together quickly. They would wait until the next shift change, when the guards were most vulnerable. One team would create a massive disturbance in the dormitory sections, drawing most of the security forces. Another team would seize the computer core. A third team would capture several high-ranking administrators, including, if possible, Director Kesmoth himself. The operation began during the night cycle, when most tribute workers were supposed to be sleeping. The diversionary team started fires in 3 different locations using chemicals Imsora had stolen from the medical facility. Alarms blared throughout the facility. Guards rushed toward the fires, following their training. While they were distracted, Anjuel led a team of 20 humans to the computer core. They moved through maintenance shafts and service corridors, avoiding the main passages. The core was protected by locked doors and a small security detail. The locks meant nothing to Han Ji-woo's stolen access cards. The security detail consisted of 4 guards who were quickly overwhelmed by 20 determined humans. Within 30 minutes, Han Ji-woo had access to the facility's primary systems. He immediately locked down all docking bays, preventing ships from leaving or arriving. He sealed off entire sections of the facility, trapping guards away from critical areas. He displayed a message on every screen in the facility: the humans were now in control. Simultaneously, Baekhyun's team captured Director Kesmoth in his office. The director had been trying to coordinate the response to the fires and did not notice the humans entering through the ventilation system until it was too late. They took him and 3 other administrators to the computer core, where they were secured and kept under guard. From the computer core, BQ broadcast a message to the entire facility using the translation systems. His words were clear and simple. The humans now controlled critical facility systems. They held hostages, including the director. They had the ability to disable life support in any section of the facility. They wanted to negotiate directly with the Galactic Council. Their demands were straightforward. All tribute workers, not just humans, should receive better treatment and protections. The tribute system should be reformed to prevent abuse. And most importantly, humans should be returned to Earth immediately, with a guarantee that Earth would never again be required to send tribute workers. If these demands were not met within 72 hours, the humans would begin systematically destroying the facility. They would release dangerous chemicals into the ventilation systems. They would overload the power generators. They would open all the airlocks simultaneously. They were prepared to die, but they would take the facility and everyone in it with them. Kesmoth listened to Baekhyun's broadcast with complete shock. This was not supposed to be possible. Tribute workers were supposed to be broken and submissive. They were not supposed to organize military operations and seize control of council facilities. He had no protocols for this situation because it had never happened before in the entire history of the tribute. System and emergency message went out to the Galactic Council. The Drexus 4 facility was in crisis. Human tribute workers had staged a successful rebellion. They held hostages and controlled critical systems. They were demanding changes to the entire tribute system, and they appeared to be completely serious about their threat to destroy everything. If their demands were not met, the Council would have to respond. The question was how. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session within hours of receiving the report from Drexus 4. The Council chamber was a massive circular room where representatives from 12 species gathered to debate matters of galactic importance. Today the chamber hummed with urgent, angry conversation. Ambassador Thalzik stood at the center podium, his forearms gesturing in agitation as he spoke. The situation was unprecedented and embarrassing. A group of tribute workers had seized control of a council facility. They had taken hostages. They were making demands. And worst of all, they were human tribute workers from Earth. The species the council had just contacted, the representative from the Kelroth species. A massive being covered in thick scales demanded immediate military action. Send in combat troops. Retake the facility by force. Execute the rebellious humans as an example. Show the galaxy that the Council would not tolerate this kind of defiance from primitive species but the Vaxillian military commander who had visited Drexisfor to assess the situation delivered troubling news. The humans had fortified the computer core effectively. They had demonstrated knowledge of explosive devices, having created improvised bombs. From medical supplies, they had shown they understood the facility's life support systems. Any military assault would likely result in massive casualties and possibly the destruction of the entire facility. A representative from the logical Terrene species raised a different concern. She had reviewed the treaty language that governed tribute worker collection. Her analysis was damning. Earth had technically complied with every requirement. The treaty specified humans capable of labor within certain age and health parameters. It said nothing about criminal history, psychological stability, or temperament. If the Council punished Earth for this, Earth could argue that the Council had failed to specify their requirements clearly. The Kelroth representative roared that this was obviously a deception. Earth knew what the Council wanted. They had deliberately sent criminals instead of their best people. This was an act of bad faith. But the Terrene representative calmly pointed out that the Council had assumed too much. They had assumed every species would interpret the tribute tradition the same way. They had assumed Earth would understand and accept the unspoken expectations. These assumptions had proven incorrect. While the Council argued, President Kongdeho requested permission to address them directly via holographic transmission. After heated debate, they agreed. Kong's image appeared in the center of the council chamber, showing appropriate respect but no fear. Kong spoke carefully, choosing each word with precision. He expressed regret that the council was unsatisfied with Earth's tribute workers. He acknowledged that perhaps there had been a cultural misunderstanding. Earth had interpreted the treaty's requirements literally, as was common in human legal traditions. If the council had wanted specific types of individuals, they should have specified that in the treaty. However, Kong continued, Earth was prepared to offer a solution. Earth would gladly accept the return of all 500 humans, with no harm done to any of them. These humans would be taken back into Earth custody and handled appropriately. In exchange, Earth requested two things. First, that the tribute requirement be permanently waived for Earth. Second, that Earth be given time to develop proper relations with the Council before any future obligations were imposed. Ambassador Thalzik began to protest, but other council members cut him off. The Terrene representative noted that Kong's offer was actually quite reasonable. The Council would rid itself of dangerous tribute workers who had proven impossible to control. Earth would take responsibility for its own citizens, and the Council could avoid the embarrassment of having their facility destroyed by humans they had insisted on taking in the first place. The financial representative from the merchant Dravik species added that military action would be expensive. The Drexisfor facility was valuable. The tribute workers from other species inside were valuable. The hostages were valuable. Destroying everything to punish a few hundred humans made no economic sense. Better to accept Earth's offer and move on. The debate continued for hours. Some council members wanted to stand firm on principle. Others wanted revenge for the insult. But gradually, practical concerns won out over pride. The humans had demonstrated they were too dangerous and unpredictable to be worth the trouble. They had also exposed weaknesses in the tribute system that could inspire other species to resist. The smartest course of action was to end this situation quickly and quietly. The council voted. By a narrow margin, they agreed to accept Earth's offer with one modification. Earth would take back the 500 humans, and the tribute requirement would be waived. However, Earth would also be placed on restricted status for the next 50 cycles. During this time, Earth would have limited access to galactic trade and would be monitored closely for any aggressive tendencies. President Kong accepted these terms without argument. Restricted status was far better than having 500 of Earth's people enslaved for decades. And frankly, Earth needed time to develop better technology before fully engaging with the galactic community anyway. The restrictions would provide cover for Earth to build strength without counsel. Interference. The agreement was transmitted to Drexus 4. Director Kesmoth, still being held hostage in the computer core, was instructed to inform the humans that their demands had been partially met. All humans would be returned to Earth unharmed. The tribute system would not be reformed galaxy-wide, but Earth would never again be required to participate. Baekhyun received this news with satisfaction. He had not expected to win complete reform of the tribute system. That would have been impossible with one action. But he had one freedom for himself and the other humans. He had defended Earth's honor in a strange way, and he had sent a clear message to the galaxy that humans would not submit to enslavement. The humans released their hostages and surrendered control of the facility peacefully. They had made their point and achieved their goals. There was no reason to cause further damage. Director Kesmoth watched them with a mixture of relief and lingering fear. These humans had been polite and even helpful during their final hours in the facility, showing him and the other hostages no cruelty. But he would never forget the cold efficiency with which they had taken control of everything. The return journey to Earth took 8 days. This time, the transport ship's crew treated the humans with considerable respect. No one wanted to provoke another incident. The humans were given better food, more comfortable quarters, and essentially left alone. Baekhyun used the time to discuss with the others what would happen when they returned. They would be pardoned for their service to Earth, but they would also be carefully monitored. They were still dangerous people who had committed terrible crimes, but they had also done something remarkable. They had faced down an alien civilization and won. They had protected Earth's sovereignty in the strangest way possible. They were villains who had become heroes, at least for a brief moment. When the ships entered Earth's orbit, President Kong addressed the nation. He explained what had happened, how Earth's response to the tribute demand had backfired for the Council. He acknowledged that the 500 humans being returned were criminals, but they were criminals who had served Earth's interests brilliantly. They would receive full pardons for their actions during the tribute incident. Though their original sentences would be reviewed on a case-by-case basis, the landing was broadcast live across Earth. The 500 humans descended from the transport ships to a complex reception. Some people cheered them as heroes who had stood up to alien oppression. Others protested that murderers and terrorists were being pardoned. The debate would continue for years. Baekhyun stepped onto Earth's soil and breathed the familiar air. He had left as a prisoner sentenced to life imprisonment. He was returning as something else entirely. Not quite a hero, not quite a villain, something in between. He had helped protect humanity's dignity, and that had to count for something. In orbit above, Commander Jexler prepared to return to Council space. He filed his final report on the incident, warning future Council representatives to be very careful in their dealings with humans. They were unpredictable, creative, and dangerous when pushed. They did not think like other species. They did not respect authority the way other species did. And they were frighteningly effective when they decided to fight back. Ambassador Thalzix added his own report to the Council archives. He recommended that humanity be classified as a species requiring extreme caution. They should not be provoked unnecessarily. They should not be underestimated. And they should never, under any circumstances, be enslaved or treated as inferior. The Council had learned a painful lesson about assuming that. Primitive species would submit meekly to galactic traditions. The tribute system continued to operate across the galaxy. But it was never quite the same after the human incident. Other species had watched what happened at Drexus 4. They had seen that resistance was possible. Tribute workers from several species began causing small problems, testing boundaries, refusing to be completely submissive. The Council was forced to reform the system. providing better conditions and clearer rights for tribute workers. On Earth, life gradually returned to normal. The 500 returned prisoners were integrated back into society in various ways. Some returned to prison after psychological evaluation showed they remained dangerous. Others were placed under house arrest or supervision. A few, like Baekhyun, were recruited by Earth's military to help train soldiers in unconventional warfare tactics. President Kang reflected on the entire incident with mixed feelings. Earth had avoided the tribute system, but at the cost of revealing how dangerous humans could be. The Council now feared Earth, which provided protection but also isolation. Humanity would need to be very careful in its future interactions with the galactic community. But there was also pride. When faced with an impossible demand from a more advanced civilization, Earth had found a creative solution. Humanity had refused to submit. They had turned the Council's own rules against them. They had proven that humans would not be pushed around. Not by aliens, and not by anyone. The message had been sent and received across the galaxy. Humanity was now part of the galactic community, but on their own terms. They were a species to be respected, negotiated with, and treated as equals. Because underestimating humans and trying to enslave them had backfired spectacularly, and somewhere in the Council archives, new notation appeared next to Earth's entry in the species database. It was marked in the bright red color reserved for dangerous species requiring special handling. The notation read simply, "Extreme caution advised. Do not provoke. Do not enslave. Do not underestimate. Humanity is unpredictable and responds to threats with creative violence. Recommend peaceful diplomatic engagement only." It was not the introduction to the galactic community that Earth had expected, but it was the introduction they had earned.